this is going to be a little bit of Krauser in the car. Making the best use of time, so forgive me, but the steering wheel will be in the way for this video. I wanted to talk to you guys really quickly about Ruth May Price. Ruth May Price is the youngest of the Price girls, but her point of view is super important. She's actually one of my favorite characters that I've ever encountered in a book, and especially for this book. Kingsolver writes from her point of view. That's why don't get confused when you see words like drowned and things that are being misspelled. She's talking as a young person. So her point of view is going to be skewed and differently than some of the older siblings. But that doesn't mean that what she sees and what happens to her and how she thinks of things is wrong. But you need to always ask the questions in terms of characterization and point of view and narration is, can you trust the narrator? The narrator in this section is Ruth May Price, a young girl. So is she a fallible narrator or is she an infallible narrator? Is she someone that you can trust implicitly, meaning that everything that she says is 100% correct? Or do we have to sift through some of the information like we would an actual young person? Imagine if you have a young sibling or you babysit young people. When they tell you a story, you're usually not going to believe every single aspect of their story, but you will be able to pick out the grain of truth in every single statement that they say. So I would argue that for Ruth May Price, we need to do a very similar tactic here in terms of that. But remember, the other Price daughters, although some of them are still older, they're still young. I mean, you're talking about people that are wide ages here, with Leah being one of the oldest and Ruth May being one of the youngest. Now, very important that we pay attention to the point of views of the girls. But Ruth May Price is really funny when she speaks, but is also very serious and innocent at the same time. For instance, here she starts off, she doesn't start off, but later on in her section says, "My name is Ruth May Price and I hate the devil." Now, that's kind of funny, but notice the type of family that she's coming from. A very religious, full of fervor Baptist preacher. And just read over this and see what she believes her family believes. Specifically about race. She spends a lot of time, even right from the get-go, going over a story from the book of Genesis about how Noah cursed one of his sons, Ham. It was really a curse on his son Canaan, and thus came the Canaanites. But many people through history, and what her family seems to have been doing as well, is they take that story to mean that Ham is the father of all black people, father of all Africans and people with darker skin, and because him and his family were cursed by Noah, they were cursed to be slaves, and thus people in history, especially in American history, have actually used the curse of Ham to justify slavery. And you can see a lot of instances of that in literature, in African American literature, in textbooks. You can see it all over the place, where people really thought that slavery was condoned in the Bible because Noah cursed Ham and his descendants, who were supposedly dark-skinned, to be servants and slaves, and thus the Bible tells white people to have servants and slaves. And so you can see that if you read a lot of African American literature, the curse of Ham keeps coming up over and over and over again. So notice that Ruth May Price understands this as a young person, as she believes that there is a difference between her and her family, the whites, and the tribes of Ham. The bad people, the cursed people, the people that the Bible says have to be slaves. And so now she's in a situation where she even recognizes that she's one of the only white people in this predominantly black African village. So essentially she believes that she is now surrounded by the tribes of Ham. So how is this ideology that she has in her head, and that her family most likely has, how is that going to impact their relationship with the Africans in the Congo? Is it going to cause tension? Is it going to be a big plot of the book? We don't know yet, but it's important that we pay attention to it, because starting off introducing us with Ruth May Price by talking about the tribes of Ham is no accident. This book is going to bring up racial differences, a book about white missionaries from the Deep South in the 60s going to Africa to evangelize. Of course it's going to be about race. Now notice too that Ruth May Price that is, she did clue us in a bit about what was going on in the Deep South of America at the time. Remember, this family's from Georgia, so she even noted that the tribes of Ham, the African Americans, were not allowed to even go to the zoo at the same time as the white people then. That they were not allowed to go to the same water fountains. They were not allowed to go to the same schools. So in a book that's now taking place in the Congo, we still have bits and pieces of the setting from which this family came, because that is right around the time of segregation, where racism is still alive and well. So we need to pay attention to race in this book. We need to pay attention to what's going on with every single character in terms of who they are, and also how they see the other races and where they're getting this racism from, or how they're casting off the racism. So pay attention to it, especially when Ruth May Price is talking, because she's a younger character. She's saying things naively because she's saying what she overheard other people talking about. So pay attention to it, super important.